ESPN is out with a new documentary series, Origin, the story of the Basketball Africa League. Here's our Perry Russom.
The Basketball Africa League was decades in the making, a bold idea spanning 2 continents, bringing the best basketball players from Africa together to compete in a league of their own. Now streaming on ESPN, Origin, the story of the Basketball Africa League, shares how a league built on talent, ambition, and opportunity for all, with basketball being a unifying force across different cultures and languages, from the players on the floor to the leaders shaping its future, including former President Obama. Take a look.
Africa is a young continent. It is a continent full of extraordinary young talent, but so many of these kids just don't get exposure to opportunity. But with the Basketball Africa League, we think that Africa as a continent is primed to see basketball take off as a sport in a way that will be good for the continent and good for the world.
And joining us now is Emmy-nominated producer and director of Origin, the story of the Basketball Africa League, Richard Brown. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So you've worked on True Detective and Catch-22. Those are scripted shows, scripted series.
That's true, yes.
What about BAL's story did you feel like had to be done through a documentary here?
I think it was compelling right off the bat when I heard that the NBA was creating the first league it had ever created outside of North America, and that it was doing it across the African continent, which, you know, the African continent is 54 countries, which I think a lot of people over here don't realize, that it's 54 distinct countries. And that was already compelling to sort of dig in and learn more. And I found out quite quickly that people of the caliber of President Obama and Joakim Noah and Grant Hill and Forrest Whitaker and Dikembe Mutombo were involved. And that sort of made me want to know more.
What narratives about Africa does this documentary take on?
I think we're interested in exploring the disconnect in the narratives around Africa that people typically hear in the West. We typically tend to hear stories about, you know, poverty and aid, and, you know, or if it's positive, it tends to be about, you know, safaris. And I'd been to the continent a few times before I went to make this project, and that wasn't my experience at all. And then going there to film this, what we saw was the Africa we found was vibrant and vital and alive and modern.
What influence has President Obama had on the game in Africa?
I think President Obama's had a huge influence in Africa in general. And one of the ways he's had a big influence is that there's a complicated history between Africa and America, you know? And I think that the BAL, which President Obama is an advisor to the BAL and has been from the beginning, the BAL acts as a kind of bidirectional bridge between the 2 continents, by which I mean that there's obviously, it opens pathways for young Africans to, you know, to come and have opportunity.
You travel to so many countries in Africa, you met so many players. Is there one player story that sticks with you the most?
I'd say there's a couple. Mamadou Diop is a Senegalese sports teacher. He teaches in, you know, it's a very rural area, and he has to commute, so to speak, 3 times a week, 9 hours on, you know, a scooter and then a bus to Dakar to train with his players, his team. And he discovered, as we were filming him, that his team had qualified for the BAL, and he had this sort of life-changing opportunity, and that was great to be around that. That was inspiring. But on the other end of the spectrum, it was kind of exciting that J. Cole, one of the legendary hip-hop artists, J. Cole, signed up because each team is allowed to have 2 players from outside the continent on their roster. And J. Cole had almost become an NBA player. And so he, you know, he sort of put his hand up and said, I'd love to go check it out. And he came and played in the first BAL for the Rwanda Patriots. And it was amazing to watch. It was his first time on the continent. He came there to play as a, you know, and he was good. He's a very good player, but also it was just great to watch his relationship with the kids in his team in Rwanda.
Richard, thank you for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All 4 episodes of Origin, the story of the Basketball Africa League, are available now to stream on the ESPN app.